I haven't integrated the birth chart, so I won't use information from the internet, my own guesses, divination, or anything like that to talk about this matter. However, we can discuss this. Such a wonderful young person encountering pressure from these people and these situations. In fact, from the birth chart, is it possible to see whether you might encounter a major misfortune and whether this misfortune is related to other people? Hello, everyone. In today's episode, with the Mid-Autumn Festival approaching, I originally wanted to talk about why we all have this feeling of reunion during the festival and what kind of people especially long for togetherness. However, something happened recently that made me pause and think, maybe I should actually talk about something else first. About Yu Menglong, about this well-known celebrity and the incident that happened. I think there's a general consensus on this. None of us really believe that it was suicide. Given the videos that have surfaced and the loud piercing screams in a residential community, it's honestly hard for people in Taiwan to even imagine such a situation. How could it be that in a residential community with such hellish screams, no one called the police, no one stepped in to help? I still remember when I was teaching before, there was a case of domestic violence in the neighboring building. I took my students and rushed downstairs, and we found that there was already a group of people downstairs ready to go up and stop the abusive father. I even wrote about this incident on my blog, Lin Shugenbu. So you can see in Taiwan, this kind of thing, when people notice this kind of situation, and now all the evidence that has come out points to the fact that it absolutely could not have been a suicide. Of course, the recent news reports are saying that it was an accidental death, that he accidentally fell, that he was drunk or something and accidentally fell, and then who would scream so loudly and desperately before accidentally falling? Who would shout for help and cry out like that? So I think this is truly, truly, truly a very heartbreaking thing. We hope that, at least in the afterlife, he no longer has to suffer, that he no longer has to endure pain, because according to the information, he had already experienced a lot of injustice and unfair treatment before he passed away. Of course, we also hope that such things will not happen in Taiwan, although over the past year or so, there have also been many similar incidents in Taichung for reasons we don't understand. It's very strange how people can suddenly die like that. And in such a big city, they can't even find out the truth. In just 1 year, hundreds of people have died, and all in very strange ways, just lying by the roadside or falling from a tall building, or even 3 people jumping from the same place at the same time. Things like this, it's just too much of a coincidence, isn't it? It makes me really want to go over and see if maybe the feng shui there is just really bad. But if it's a feng shui problem, then why didn't people jump before and only now they are? And in Taichung City, absolutely no one is coming out to talk about this. As for the Taichung police, every single case, they just say it's an accident. There have been these suicides, yet not a single family member has come forward to discuss like, hey, why did my child die here? This is really a very bizarre thing. I won't speculate. I won't guess at the reasons behind it. I just feel that from the perspective of someone who studies physiognomy or is a fortune teller, when there are strange phenomena in the heavens or in society, there must be something odd going on. There must be something fishy. Just like I always say, every word I say must be backed by evidence, and I need to have reason and logic before I'm willing to speak. So, in the absence of any information, all I can say is that this is just too strange. Why is it so strange? As for these unclear matters, honestly, I think there are probably already people online circulating his chart and starting to analyze it and so on. So, seeing things like this happen, what makes me really, really sad is that those people who used to talk about how wonderful that land was, when things like this happen, they never come forward to speak out, nor do they tell us anything. Those who say art is art, politics is politics, also never come forward at times like this. They just watch a life fall, fully aware in their hearts that this is definitely not that simple, and it definitely won't be an accident or a suicide. Everyone knows the truth, but none of them are willing to come forward and face this issue, nor are they willing to ask, hey, is there something wrong here? Yet at the same time, from another angle, they keep telling you art is art, politics is politics. Is it really like that? This is something truly saddening. So we won't discuss this today because I don't have any inside information. So I won't use things from the internet or my own guesses or divinations or anything like that. I won't talk about this matter. However, we can discuss how such a wonderful young man, and then he, when faced with the pressure from these people, these situations, actually, is it possible to see from a natal chart whether you will encounter a great misfortune? And this misfortune is related to people, but this matter can be discussed from an academic perspective. Whether or not I can see this in the chart, Actually, let's think about it. For someone like Yu Menglong, so young and already receiving so much recognition and so many accolades, you can imagine that in his natal chart, he should have a triple conjunction. The gathering of Lu, Quan, and K stars is what allows him to achieve these things. However, he has also correspondingly suffered some harm, experienced pressure, and even endangered his life. So, how do we determine this kind of situation from the chart? In fact, when it comes to the study of fate analysis, I must clarify that when we were filming this video, we actually discussed whether it should be placed in the members only section because this video will delve into some rather advanced academic content. So our production team and editors were considering, teacher, should we put it in the members only section? But what really struck me about the Yu Menglong incident is that many people in their pursuit of wealth and status are willing to abandon their conscience. They can pretend that things like what happened to Yu Menglong simply don't exist. So I feel that I should discuss this and use academic principles to help everyone understand that many times just because you see money, it doesn't mean that just because you see money, you aren't violating the Constitution, or that just because you see rights in your hands, you won't face any risks. In fact, if you look at the numbers and the cases, you can clearly see these kinds of situations. While you're making money, you're also risking your life. And at the same time, you might be facing the possibility of losing everything or facing other consequences as well. You might even have to face life-threatening dangers, and I think this is something that can help a lot of people. Therefore, we should put this out in a place where everyone can see it. Maybe you're a new follower who just got to know me, and you're not that familiar with Jaidukai, perhaps. Maybe you've already done a lot of research, or maybe you just happened to come across this and saw it. You might not necessarily understand the martial arts I'm talking about, but if you have a bit of patience and listen for a while, I hope this can help you. Why is that? Because sometimes when a person is doing really well, they encounter a lot of disasters. And when they might be making a lot of money, they forget that there are actually people around them who are getting ready to harm them. If you can listen a little or perhaps understand a bit, maybe you can help yourself avoid some disasters. It's just like many of us. We only see the good parts, only see people signing with us, giving us authority, giving us opportunities. It looks like you're being given a lot of resources, but you don't realize that after you get these things, the price you may have to pay later is beyond your imagination. You forget this, or maybe you just don't want to face it. On that land, there are all kinds of vague things, as well as all sorts of inhumane events happening there. And then people blatantly lie with their eyes wide open. They tell their friends around them, or the people around them, or people with influence, that that land is wonderful. Where is your conscience? But the reality is, we don't want to face these things even as we are receiving them. When others give you money, where is your conscience? Maybe there are many stitches and needles behind the scenes in your fate chart that you haven't seen. Okay, so I hope that this video, for those who can understand it, can bring something to everyone. Some warnings, maybe you are currently on a good path in your operations, but you might still face some risks. That's why we urgently inserted this video right before the Mid-Autumn Festival reunion video. During the Mid-Autumn Festival, everyone hopes to reunite and be together with their family. No matter whether you are facing storms or enjoying a bountiful harvest, when you encounter hardships, you hope your family will be by your side to help you get through it. When you have a good harvest, you want to share it with your family, but we know that Yu Menglong can no longer do that. So here we hope that such things will never happen again. One very important point is that we need to have a good social environment. At the very least, fairness and justice must exist, rather than having to rely on people raising their voices online and protesting, only to end up with the conclusion that it was just an accident. Who would believe that? If they can lie about something like this, how can you expect the land to protect you? Right now, things in Taipei should still be okay, maybe Kaohsiung too. But as for Taichung, it's hard to say. Okay, let's take a look. Under what circumstances would something like this happen? First of all, everyone needs to rule out one thing. When many people are looking at charts, they only look at one thing, the natal chart. I keep emphasizing that events do not occur in the natal chart. What your natal spouse palace looks like, what your natal wealth palace looks like, what your natal career palace looks like, honestly, these have nothing to do with making money, getting married, or what job you do. These foolish teachers keep using the natal chart to discuss things with everyone. The natal chart represents my innate traits and the things that are supposed to happen to me. But in reality, there's a huge gap, a huge difference. It's like, I was born a Ferrari, but what about the transit chart? That's like the kind of road I'll be driving on. Even if I'm a Ferrari, if I drive on a road that's prone to landslides, I'll still end up as scrap metal. It's just that I'm a Ferrari turned into scrap metal, but scrap metal is still scrap metal. However, since it's Ferrari scrap metal, it can be sold for a better price. There's no such thing. So everyone, remember the first thing. When we're looking at a natal chart, we must pay attention to which luck cycle you're on. Even if you have great conditions, when you're on a bad luck cycle, there's still a significant risk. The second thing is when discussing a natal chart, you absolutely cannot just talk about whether you have Hua Lu, Hua Ke, Hua Quan, or whether you have a good structure. You can't just discuss these things. What you really need to look at is when good luck appears for me, what happens then? Am I in sync with it? I might also encounter bad luck. Well, when someone is thinking about something, let's say someone is making a lot of money, when they're making a lot of money, it's very likely that their major fortune line is intersecting with Tu Lu at the same time. As I just mentioned, today's content is a bit more difficult, so please be patient. When the major fortune line intersects with Tu Lu, these Tu Lu could be Hua Lu or they could be Ru Kun, but think about it. If his wealth palace shows Lucan instead of Huaru, then his children palace will definitely have a solitary young star. And if by chance the disaster palace adds another young star, then his Zitian line is almost completely broken. This kind of situation happens quite often. While making money, the wealth vault is being depleted at the same time. Does this kind of situation exist? Have you seen many people who, while making money, experience this at the same time? They keep spending money. This is the most typical sign. And what else do the children and property palaces represent? They represent business partners and also whether you might get hurt outside your home. This is something that many people overlook when reading a chart. When I make money at the same time, there's also a chance that inauspicious stars may appear. In fact, many times when you're about to have a breakthrough, for example, when the fire soup, green soup, or Mars are together with it, or when the lone star is together with it, both of these are inauspicious stars. What happens if these two are together with the greedy wolf star? If they also bring in the root, especially if the stars next to them are possibly Zitan, Wutan, or Liantan, and if the adjacent stars also bring in things like Hualu or Huake, then it will be a situation of sudden success. Fire soup and spirit pellet must be accompanied by Lu, Quan, or Ke, otherwise this kind of sudden success won't occur. But think about this for a moment. If it is accompanied by Lu, Quan, or Ke and rises quickly, its inauspicious stars are still present. If more inauspicious stars are added, harm will occur. This is why we often say that when people are making money, disasters tend to follow closely behind. This is also why I keep telling everyone that the money you earn should be used to make donations and accumulate your own merit, because only when you have enough merit can it help you avoid many disasters. That's the main reason. Okay, so now you all understand that often when you're experiencing good luck, actually, misfortune often follows right behind or lingers nearby. In this kind of structure, your misfortune can come from many different places. So, under such circumstances, everyone needs to pay attention to one thing. When you see your fortune line, when you reach the third level of Jiahui, Fenglu, and Quanke, you need to pay attention to where the inauspicious stars are located. In class, we often joke that when analyzing a person's chart, you should actually look at the fortune palace and the extreme misfortune palace rather than just focusing on their life, wealth, and career palaces. Why is that? Because in the past, everyone only paid attention to the life palace, wealth palace, and career palace, checking if there was a third level Jiahui to represent good luck or a successful career. But what's the point if your career is great and your luck is good, but your health falls apart? Or your career and job are excellent, but your luck is terrible? What's the use of that? Besides the fortune palace and the extreme misfortune palace, what other palaces should you look at? The friends palace. If your luck is great, your job is great, and you make a lot of money, but you end up being betrayed, what's the point of that? Right? Honestly, these three palaces are ones that people rarely pay attention to. Everyone just talks about whether the life palace is bright, whether the wealth palace is good, whether there's a good configuration, or whether you'll make money, and so on. The reason why the left and right assistant stars are interesting and why I've spent so much time studying them is because I've been telling everyone for a long time that this is a very, very multidimensional and ever-changing technique. So why was it regarded by the emperors of the Ming and Qing dynasties as the culmination of all the arts and divinations in China? It's precisely because of its comprehensiveness. Through it, you can make comprehensive judgments about many, many things. When it comes to making judgments, it never relies on just a single aspect or a single perspective. It absolutely never looks at things from just one angle, and that's exactly why. Therefore, you need to pay attention to one thing. When you experience a period of very good fortune, you should go back and look at your own chart. On that chart, there will definitely be signs. Wow, maybe your wealth line might intersect in two directions, or perhaps your spouse or official line brings connections and circles, giving you power and status at work. Maybe that's the case. But at the same time, you must pay attention to three palaces: the Palace of Fortune and Virtue, the Palace of Ultimate Happiness, and the Palace of Universal Benefit. Now let's talk about these three palaces one by one. For the Palace of Fortune and Virtue, as long as you notice that when your luck is very good, your major line in the Palace of Fortune and Virtue has an inauspicious star. Then, if your natal palace of fortune and virtue has a malefic star, or if the annual palace of fortune and virtue has a malefic star, you need to be very careful that year. It may look like good luck on the surface, but in reality, it could be a trap, especially if at that time your palace of fortune and virtue is aligned with the same stars or facing the same stars. These signs will appear. What if there is only one malefic star? Maybe it's still okay. The next more complicated situation is when there is only one malefic star. But if the annual, natal, and major cycle palaces of fortune and virtue all simultaneously have the same malefic star, then this is a violation. So what if among these three palaces of fortune and virtue, only two of them have a malefic star? Then that's still all right. But if among the three palaces of fortune and virtue, one of them has more than one malefic star, then you need to be cautious. If there are more than two malefic stars, you need to be careful. Now, for the fourth scenario, if there is only one malefic star, but it happens to coincide with any of the following main star combinations, then you also need to pay attention. The first is when Wuk and Qixia are in the same palace, especially if Wuk is in its transformation state. The second is when Tiantong and Tianliang are in the same palace, especially if Tiantong is in Huake. The third is when Lianzhen and Tianxiang are together, especially if either is in Huaji. The fourth is when Jilian and Liang are in the same palace, especially if Tianji is in Huaji. The fifth is when Qixia is the only main star in a palace, especially if it is opposite Zi Wei or Tianfu. Moving on. If Zi Wei and Tianxiang are in the same palace, especially with Tianxiang in Huaji transformation, pay attention to these combinations. Even with one Sha star, caution is needed. With two Sha stars, problems are more likely. When these appear in your chart, be alert. Could there be issues? Is your luck a bit off too? Where does this bad luck usually manifest? Most of the time, it comes from being harmed by others. The three fortune palaces we just mentioned, whether it's the natal chart, the major fate period, or the annual luck, especially pay attention to the major fate period and the annual luck. If, for example, your current period happens to fall into the natal Fox Palace, or if the annual luck happens to fall into the natal Puyu Palace, the large-scale fishing palace, then this fortune palace indicates that you may be harmed by friends. Of course, this will affect your financial luck and so on, so you need to be extremely, extremely careful. So what is the other one? The other one is, as for the Puyu Palace itself, what about the Puyu Palace itself? If it happens to encounter, right, more than two killing stars, and either the sun or the moon is in a weak or restricted position, and the Wenchang star or Wenchu star is also present in it, then if the Lianzhen star is present, the Tanlang star is present, the Jumen star is present, or the Tianji star is present, you need to be careful about being harmed by friends, especially in those combinations just mentioned. If there are also three minor stars present, called Fei Lian, Zhibei, and Fu Bing, that all indicates that someone is preparing to harm you from behind. At this point, you really need to worry about this issue. If this Pu Yigong happens to overlap with any of your annual fortunes palaces because it's a major star, and if Pu Yigong happens to overlap with any of your annual fortunes palaces, it means that any of those palaces in your annual fortune could be harmed by friends. Such situations can occur. The third is the extremely inauspicious palace. As for the extremely inauspicious palace, as long as there are two or more Sha, malefic stars present, and if you also see Honglan and Qian series stars appear, then this indicates that your health is going to have problems. Of course, for a major problem to occur, it must show up in all three charts. That is, the natal chart's extremely inauspicious palace, the major fates, extremely inauspicious palace, and the annual fortune's extremely inauspicious palace must all have issues. However, for minor issues like bloodshed or injuries, just one extremely inauspicious palace is enough. So you only need to look at the extremely inauspicious palace in the annual fortune for that. If all three of those combinations just mentioned come together, then that's an extremely dangerous situation. And you really need to be very, very careful. But if only one of them is present, then you should be aware that maybe your health isn't good. And even if you're trying to make money, you might end up harming your body. Maybe your relationships with friends are very poor, so when you make money, you might be harmed by your friends. Or perhaps your fortune palace is not good, so even though you make a lot of money, you'll still have a lot of bad luck. And the issues mentioned above will be affected. But if all three are present, then you really need to be careful. Be wary of friends around you who might harm you, because that's definitely a sign that you could end up in a very, very miserable situation. They could bring your career down to the point where you can't recover. You have to understand that some people, when they hate you and want to harm you, are completely without conscience. They feel absolutely no sense that they should be implicated or face any consequences. And there really are people like this in the world. So when you see such signs in your chart, you need to pay attention to this matter. In other words, usually after we help clients with fortune telling, you'll often see that, wow, if someone is in high spirits, like I just mentioned, when a person is full of vigor, they are definitely in a very prosperous state. However, malefic stars usually follow behind this prosperity or are hidden beneath it. Because when you're thriving, you can't see those risks. So usually when we're doing fortune telling for clients, if we see that they're in a very prosperous state, we'll also pay attention to whether there are malefic stars lurking beneath or if someone is plotting against them. Now, I haven't looked at his chart, but from a blood related perspective, I suspect he probably has all three types present. So using his situation as an example, I want to tell everyone that in the theory of Zi Wei Dou Shu, you can look at things from a comprehensive perspective. After all, when people are having good luck, they often overlook those around them who might want to harm them. When someone is down on their luck, there's less reason for others to harm them. If you're already struggling, there's not much benefit in targeting you. So in fortune telling, we often remind everyone of this. By looking at your Zi Wei Dou Shu chart, you'll discover where your path in life lies, especially when your luck isn't so good. And when your luck is good, you'll also be able to see where the potential threats from others might come from. I hope this is helpful to everyone, and I also hope that none of us will ever have to encounter such situations. In remembrance and in the haze of memories, I hope you no longer have to suffer.